let me put it as starkly as I can. The moment you take the first diamond, you are only going downhill. And yet, one after another, governments forget this. The only certainty with any mineral is that at some point it will end.
Empty,
How clearly can it be?
Yeah.
Understood. And yet, governments mine minerals as if they are forever. So that is our, if you wish, shortcoming. Because we mine the diamonds as if they'll always be here. There is no sense of agency. There is no sense of anxiety about the future.
That's really my...
And yet from day one, the moment we recovered the first carat, it was a minus, not a plus. So this is a terrible tragedy.
Hi everyone, this is Growth Well Podcast again, coming to you from Gaborone, Botswana, and your host, Oabona Kgengwenyane. So we're looking forward to this one as usual. The whole purpose is to bring some insights, some ideas from thought leaders on ideas that can influence and impact Africa positively. So one of the most debatable, one of the most important assets in Africa is how we're endowed with all these minerals and all the natural resources that we are blessed with. So today we bring you an expert in the field, an advisor to governments. She's advised the World Bank and African Development Bank. She's a former CEO of Debeers here in Botswana. And I bring you none other than Miss Sheila Khama. Welcome, Miss Sheila.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so looking forward to this.
So
you won't believe it. And simply because, perhaps you're a bit older than me, but in Botswana, the diamonds really made an impact of who I am. I was sponsored by Botswana, went to study to master's level, came back, employed by the industry. Even right now, even the work that I'm doing as an entrepreneur is very much reliant on that. So you can imagine how that is quite important. So I'm very thrilled that you agreed to come and share this. And today, obviously, it's not just for Botswana, but also how minerals, oil and gas have really influenced African development. So we very much look forward to this. Now, before I even start, I think I have to add that, I think you've been my sister for a couple of years now, many years, I'm sure you remember, in terms of trying to contribute to the development of this country, up until what you are doing right now globally. And I have to really say with utmost admiration of the work that you're doing, especially from a global aspect, but still knowing your footing here in Botswana, that you still come back and we discuss and we've debated issues. We've written some work together in the past around the diamond industry in Botswana. So I'm really, really have to say that I'm one of those people that I really admire your work and thanks, and keep going. And I'm hoping that the men and women, not just in Botswana and Africa, are watching what you can still do with passion and purpose, right up to our years.
Thank you.
So as we start, I just wanted to first just ask from your point of view, how you have managed to stay focused and worked for corporate to now being almost a global trotter. I was listening to one of your podcasts, how you talk about the iron ore corridor, the Ashanti gold corridor. We've got the diamonds. Such a rich amount of information and knowledge that you have. So what has motivated, what has made you to play this space?
So there is a certain flaw in your question, and the flaw is here. It presumes that somehow I exist with a grand scheme. Yeah. So let me just disabuse you of that. Nothing could be further from the truth. On the contrary, I think if I'm anchored in anything at all, it is that I do things because they're in truth with my values. If it feels right with me, it is right. And if it feels right, I'll find the energy and the passion and the discipline. And if I think about my entire career, I don't remember ever wanting to be anything other than just to be myself.
Authentic.
And I think this is what drives me. And that comes with, I think, the ability to speak to oneself. You can lie to everybody. By God, you can't lie to yourself. And so I've learned the art of asking myself questions. And when you do, the answers come ready. So when I was approaching at my end of 9 to 5, I asked myself, what would I do? And it seemed to me that the one thing I wouldn't do was lie idle. And it seemed to me that I needed to do things that I was able to do competently with very little support, because coming from the corporate environment, the ADB, the World Bank, you have an ecosystem that supports you.
Correct.
And so I needed to find a place where I could function as efficiently, as productively, with little. And the natural resource space with my network, what I know. So the things you talk about come naturally to me because this is my world. I may come across as intelligent, but the truth is I'm no more intelligent than
you're just being yourself.
Yes, I'm in my element. A doctor would be equally impressive. But I also recognize that I had, for lack of a better word, come of age. I was remain a citizen of Botswana, but I was also a child of the universe. And you don't leave home twice, you leave home once. And with that, home is never the same. And this was the case for me. I progressively became a Botswana with a very outward look.
Outward-looking, yes.
And I formed friendships. I learned from people. I partnered with institutions. These institutions were now a part of my ecosystem. And this is the groundswell of resourcefulness I wanted to tap. And so my first thoughts was that I was going to write books and blogs and create a website and talk to the subject of natural resources in a way I didn't think they were talked about. They are mystified. People use terminology. And I wanted to talk to people in a way that people could see themselves, and people didn't have to be educated in any complex way to understand. And so the policy space, which is public policy, governance, and sustainable development, looked to me like the perfect sweet spot. So that came much more quickly and clearly in the beginning. What wasn't clear was how I would reach the world. Look, it'll surprise you that I didn't have a clue what Twitter was. Or in fact, I had to call a young person I work with in Ghana and say, love, what is a hashtag? I sent an email to Ghana to ask a young girl. And she was generous enough to say, I think we need a Zoom conversation. And the young people taught me. And then I realized that social media was the way. I was educated by young people. They reinvented my way of thinking because I suddenly realized how powerful social media is. The capacity to reach people just with the click of a button. What a life, I thought. And so I was in New York and was at a bookstore at an airport, picked up a book. It said how to start a podcast. I went over the counter and asked the young man, what's a podcast? He explained as quickly as he could about the book, crossed the Atlantic, never slept, read the book, started a podcast when I arrived
How
in
many years?
Botswana.
How many years ago?
This was exactly the day before New York shut down because of COVID.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, I think there is a need to help people be informed, so that they can participate meaningfully in public policy. I think natural resources are essential across the world, but even more so in developing countries because they tend to be the hand that feeds us. Yes, this is true, but unless they are firstly governed properly, then they just become political capital.
They do.
Yeah.
They do.
Instead of being natural resources. Unless they are managed sustainable, which is to say, with a view to future generations, then we are vulnerable to their finite nature. And so my approach to the conversation of natural resource public policy is one, first, policy dialogue. Two, look at it through the lens of governance. And three, ensure that the policies en masse are sustainable. And so somehow I have, over time, in the last 3 years, become very clear what that looks like. But I'd be lying if I said, when I first started, I knew what it was. I just knew you do it damn well.
That's very impressive. Very impressive because, I mean, we say it so lightly, but, my mom was an educationalist. And, these very strong, disciplinary women. She retired. She said, son, what can I do? And she retired. She was very clear. She said, hey, this advent of computers and all that, I said, hey, it's time to it's time to pass. And that's how she retired. But after retirement, I could see my mom was in a little bit of a crisis of what to do. So why this conversation is very important, because I see lots of people. I mean, you took, like you said, you took action, you studied podcasts, you did what? But, a lot of people struggle with that in terms of how to start again. They talk about there are waves of transitioning. You start as a young person, you get into corporate, your 40s, you get a bit of a crisis, what to do next, another curve starts. So these curves, this transition needs to be managed. And you seem to have managed yours quite impressively, I have to say.
So I don't do crisis. I want to explain. I'm not the panicking type. My philosophy on life is that why wouldn't there be a problem in my life? This is the only certainty, is that you will have problems. You just face them square one in the belief that some you win, some you lose. I think some of the best things that have ever happened to me, for instance, was being fired. I've been fired so many times I can't remember. And yet every time I reflect on it, it was a damn good thing.
Yes.
Because I don't begrudge fate. I think the world owes me nothing, but I owe me a lot. And so with that, I very rarely take a pause. I very rarely take a pause. So the moment I retired, it was very clear which house I was going to move into, where the furniture was going to sit, how many books I was going to buy, and what I was going to do. And the moment I said podcast, I went to my database of 8,000 Outlook contact numbers, screened them, wrote to 3,000 of them and said, would you be in my podcast? Only one said no. How can I go wrong? And they were all over the world. And and here's, for those to whom these things matter, it's largely about branding yourself. You spend all your life working for somebody, but actually you are investing in the person you will become. And the value of that person is never more important than post 9 to 5, because then you don't have the support of a corporate. Then you stand on your own feet. And so I take pride in the belief that there was no chance in hell I called you and you wouldn't be looking forward to talking to me. Even though we hadn't seen each other for 20 years.
For a long time.
Because I think that is the greatest investment any one of us can make, is in relationships that are respectable and credible. They will stand you in good state. And so the podcast really kind of revolves around that. Even the new people, if I say to them, I will interview you, this is what I'm going to do on such a day, nothing will get in my way of delivering to them that promise. These things matter. Yeah. And so I've been very fortunate to have the discipline and the tenacity, to do that which a job needs, and not that which I want to do.
Wasn't the tenacity, the inner strength, the confidence, all those good stuff. I'll give you an example. Last year, we were doing some work for our friend company here in Botswana, and I had to contact a Silicon Valley, entrepreneur, former vice president of Yahoo, and that type of thing. And even with my entrepreneurial over 20 years, you still have the butterflies, like, we're not going to have to sit and take this guy. So he came, and you find that, there's no big deal. Just be yourself. I mean,
Exactly,
that's another thing.
right.
That's just be yourself. We went around, we even visited the president for courtesy call. And after that, we took him to the Delta, went to the Delta. And it was, and I said, there's no big deal about this.
Not
and after
at
that, I
all.
asked him, I said, look, his name is Salim Ismail. I said, Salim, you got to come onto our podcast because I've started. It's like, I want to anytime, just, fit in. And he said, but one, and I know that we've discussed this issue because it goes back to who you are. There must be a driving factor that makes certain people be able to do certain things. I'm saying this because a lot of people struggle, Khama, with even with that network, with the audacity to say podcast. And I know that you're a fairly private person. I struggled to go into, my team had to say, Mr. K, you got to go on Facebook, you got to go on LinkedIn. It's like, but I'm not. People will be contacting me, and I'm not that type of person. But and like you said, in terms of branding, you got to do it, and it has worked thus far.
Yeah.
So,
we are different. My sense is that everybody is good if they find their element. If you fly into a storm, you will struggle. Yeah, like a fish swim downstream. Yeah, and I think knowing oneself, knowing your limitations. So let me be clear. I'm not going anywhere near politics. I would fail dismally. Yeah. But that comes with knowing that is the limit of what I can do.
What you can do, yes.
And so my sense is not that some people are more capable of doing certain things.
That others
it is
are not.
more that some people know themselves better and manage themselves better and place themselves into a position in which their strengths are enhanced. So I'm not a particularly social person. So the podcast suits me. I do it from my kitchen. I don't see anybody.
Yeah, I see that.
I just do it from home and that's it. And it's a virtual existence. People send me email. I just delete. I don't do that. I exist for them virtually, and I'm very clear about that. This is not a personal relationship. You can't write me. Yeah. I don't exist as a person for you.
Yeah.
I'm just a platform. But it is that, I guess, clarity of who I am, clarity of why I do things. If I were to think about where I bring value, it is in that space.
Okay.
Yeah, things aren't great for me.
Yeah.
Things aren't great for me. I'm a great believer. People are not their professions. People are not their money.
Yep.
Hell, people are not their names.
I like that. Yeah,
people are their
true.
values.
Exactly.
I'm very clear about this. And so I think I have not met yet a person I couldn't look straight in the face and say, on this stuff, my stuff, I'm better than you.
Yeah.
Because I make sure that I'm better than them. It is not me saying it to insult them. It's just
not
a
a bragging.
statement of
It's not a
fact.
bragging,
Say, try me if you wish. But you can say that if you invest enough time to ensure that in effect you are better.
You are better.
Or that you are grown up enough that if they prove you wrong, you will say, I was wrong.
Yeah.
Then you'll fix it.
Yeah.
So my legitimacy is not a function of my being perfect. or right all the time. It's just that I'm human. That's legitimate enough. Why else do I need more? Why do I need a name? Why do I need a cousin? And all those things. Yeah. So
wonderful.
That's sort of how I managed the podcast and everything else.
Back to the subject matter. So as we said, we are here primarily on two aspects: the issue of extractives, corporate governance around it, and also issue of renewables and transitioning, which we know, especially from an African and developing countries perspective, these are very sticky issues. But before we go on to that, obviously, let's start with the topical issue. The topical issue that's hitting the headlines in South Africa and Botswana about, BHP, trying to buy Anglo, the implications for Botswana from a Debeers, the Botswana perspective. So, as typical, in Botswana, there are boardroom discussions, back of the funeral discussions, at the wedding discussions. You're like, where is the truth? Where is the truth, and where should Botswana be maneuvering to make sure that we don't come out as losers, so to speak? So I was just keen in terms of your thoughts, how you've digested this issue to see whether there could be a potential good coming out of it in terms of, for a Botswana perspective.
So the BHP matter is multifaceted, like most things. First of all, it speaks to how listed large corporates function. And if one looks at BHP, the world's biggest mining company, Australian, listed in several stock markets, imagine strategically, they want to get their hands on copper because copper is king in the world of transition to clean energy. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. It's a future positioning.
But they want to ramp it up quickly. So what better than to buy a company that already has an asset, and all you have to do is mine it and add it to your portfolio. So that makes sense. So they look around and they say, who's the weak one we can pounce on? To be fair, Anglo has been vulnerable
of late.
For a very long time because there isn't a lot of coherence about Anglo's identity, what direction they are going. And so certainly commentators have suggested for the last 10 years that Anglo are vulnerable to a takeover. So that was pretty much, could be expected. The second thing that what's happening is that you then have the geopolitics of the Anglo legacy. Most South Africans see Anglo as their company, but even if they don't, the single largest investment block in Anglo is the South African government, the employee schemes. And so that rattled the cage. The third thing that's happening is that, for whatever reason, BHP seemed half-hearted. The deal was never sweet enough. I'm a great believer you punch once.
Not this.
This was a light touch. Yeah. But not only that, then they say, oh, by the way, we are not just buying you, but actually we'll take that.
Only that, pick and choose.
Yes.
So pick and choose.
So the offering to the shareholders were Anglo was poor, to say the least. I would have been surprised. The price, most people feel, does not speak at all to the value. And so what is happening simplistically is BHP made a poor offer. The shareholders rejected it. It bought the board of Anglo and management time to regroup. And so what they've done is they have done what the expression, gone for a good defense is a better offense. And so they said, actually, we'll do what you were going to do to us, only we will do it better. But the formula stays the same. Because this was always going to be Anglo's fate. The assets were already somewhat too disjointed. They lacked the coherence of the 1990s and the 1980s. Now, coming closer to home about us, the relevance of it is this, that Anglo and ourselves are shareholders
In Debeers.
in Debeers. But not only that, Anglo holds 85% of the stock, which is to say, all things equal, they will determine what happens.
Yes.
Look, they will consult. But in truth, it's hard to stop them if they want to do something. But it isn't impossible to stop them. And the way to stop them, coming back to your second question, what can we do?
Yes, how can you maneuver this?
We don't sit and wait. We do what they've done, which is to say, okay, what opportunities does this potentially offer us? And what are the risks and how do we mitigate it? We ask the question, assuming that none of this was happening, but we just wanted a better future, how could we structure this company? Because we are on ground zero now. This is a golden opportunity to just ask the questions which, if it was business as usual, we would have no reason to ask.
Absolutely.
So if you think strategically, that's what you would do. What does that look like to me? It looks like you recognize that actually in a space in which Anglo has been disintegrated, they are no longer your best partner. BHP has already said we don't want diamonds.
Debeers,
Yeah, look, let's be clear. They are not alone. And there's a reason. Diamonds are not a metal. These companies mine metals. These are
industrial
gems.
stuff. Yes.
So, it would detract the executive.
Yes, from attention.
The focus would be lost. If you factor into that the reputational challenges of mining a substance for which there is no industrial, medical, scientific needs fundamentally, you're pushing water uphill. So it shouldn't surprise us. We stand alone in the world of mining.
Yes, yeah.
All the more reason you don't wait for Anglo. Because if Anglo feels this way, or BHP, guess what? It's a trend, it's a mindset in the industry. And so you have to think, are there other entities there to whom diamonds may be just as central?
What they want, yes.
Should we not be speaking with these people and saying, don't go far, Anglo, we'll buy you out. And make sure that that entity has the same vested interest as ourselves, the same long term, and that they will defend this turf because it is materially, financially, and strategically important. That's what we do. Now, who that entity is, that's a different matter.
That's a different,
But
that's a
it's
different
unlikely
scheme.
that entity does not exist. Were I making the decision, I would gather men and women in the room and say, okay, map me out the future as it should be and give me a couple of scenarios and then find me the partners who will allow me to deliver that. When I have that, I shall then fly to London and say, gentlemen, can we have a
can we have can you have a discussion? Can we have a chat?
Right.
This goes back to what you and I have debated: corporate governance, skills, global alertness, for lack of a better word. You know that I do a lot of strategy work, so this is the type of stuff that I advise corporations to look into. Market intelligence, when you have boards, have a rich composition of really intense discussions that provide for breakthrough opportunities type thing. So you've laid it very well, and this is the thinking that I've been having to say, what is the most opportunistic move that will be right for our people and really leverage this little bit of a fluid situation for Botswana. And the question is that happening, what you just laid down? The smoke room, the discussions, I know that the president has gone, I think a few weeks ago, where he said, yeah, we're ready. we're ready, and we've got shares in Debeers. We know what's going on, and we know exactly what to do. And unfortunately, and again, that touches on governance, is this happens, this is said, but we don't know what's going on. And you talk a lot about public participation, So how this is a very difficult combination. I don't know how you respond to that.
So the short answer is I don't know, but I must take His Excellency's word for it. If he says,
that he said. That's what I was. Yes.
One of the tragedies of the Botswana system is that power is centralized around the executive, which is cabinet.
Yeah.
If one follows governance to the latter, especially in a country in which you have had one party for 50 years, if there is genuine goodwill, which is to say the desire to do right by the citizens, you rise above your political advantage of one victory after another, and you share power because you lead for the people, by the people. And you want to be inclusive.
Yeah.
These kind of discussions would cascade to Parliament. Because there, you would have not one political party. You would have the representatives of a spectrum of parties, opinions, and citizens around the table debating the future of the single most important asset
for the country.
I cannot be clearer. It may be legally correct. It may, in fact, be the right of cabinet, but on matters of governance, it fails the fundamental principle of two things. One, transparency, which is to say, the responsibility to not just disclose information, but disclose your motives. When I know your motives, I will understand your rationale, and I will understand where you want to end, and I will be convinced that your motive serves me. And citizens deserve this. It's not enough to just tell us what you're going to do. It's important to understand fundamentally what drives you. Is it party politics? Because, well, the diamonds are not about party politics.
Yeah.
It fails the second principle of governance, which is public participation. Because when you provide all that information, and I don't mean data, I mean information produced in a way that is meaningful, that I can interpret, that my mother can interpret, that your grandma can interpret. Because these are the people for whom you lead. It fails that test because when you don't take it to Parliament, you muffle that voice. Because all those people, now multiply that by 50 years, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. The third leg of governance, which is that we hold you to account. If we don't have the information on what you're doing, your motive, we didn't debate it as Parliament, how do we hold you to account? Because now we are clueless. So clueless, I cannot even go to my MP because guess what? He's not in cabinet, and therefore he too is clueless.
It's clueless.
Why would we as a country want to do this to ourselves? It seems to me to be a failure in patriotism in the extreme. The failure to avail an opportunity for men and women in Parliament, elected by men and women in our country, the failure to bring them around the table to debate the single most important economic asset. How did we get here? So this to me is of great concern. And I think if you go back to the 60s and 70s and 80s, we were very paternalistic and frankly
Rightly so, I
benevolent.
bet. Yes,
because if you have 15 graduates, what are you going to do? You're going to huddle up.
Yeah.
But it just seems to me that there was a time in the 90s, 2000, when Botswana crossed that line and moved into a space in which there is enough critical mass of knowledge. But also the world itself is moving on in terms of demands for governance and what it looks like. The winner-takes-all approach in which if I am the government of the day, then by definition, I shall occupy the exclusive space on all things. Come on.
What's the motivator? I mean, I comment on many other issues apart from the natural resources around the negative impact of the 5-year cycle, because there is this element of desperation that we've got to cross the Rubicon come rain or shine for ourselves, for ourselves, not for the long-term aspirations. I mean, this really, really troubles me. And what I'm asking about the motivation, how do you interpret that? Is it related to that because, I mean, there's nothing as beauty as sharing, leveraging expertise like yourself. I've talked to some of the mining sector executives and all that and said, we've got such amazing talent and post-miners in this country. And I talk to them a lot, and they're just being marginalized in terms of their experience and knowledge that they've picked up from all this. And what will be the motivation for a country being the shining example and the history of Lekgotla, the history of participatory democracy, that we still say it loud, or that is what defines Botswana?
Yeah. So, in truth, I don't know what the motive is. That's above my pay grade. But I do understand in policy terms a concept called the political economy. The political economy is a phrase that basically defines the intersection between political, social, and economic interests.
Yes, yeah.
And when policies are driven by the political economy mindset, they tend to focus on enabling those in a position of power, whether political or industrial, to benefit from the institutions of the state. It's not unique to Botswana in that way.
No, I can imagine.
Some people call it, in its extreme form, state capture.
State capture, yeah.
But in policy terms, we're really looking at a situation in which those in power insert themselves at the center of not just industrial power. Those who are in industry want to cross over to influence the politics side in their favor. Yes. Those in politics want to cross over
into the industrial.
Exactly. And in the end, rather than manage the country for the groundswell of citizens, you manage it for the sake of benefiting these political interests.
Yeah.
Is that the motivation here? Who knows? But certainly the bipartisan approach suggests that. How can it be dealt with? In many ways, it's left to the citizens themselves. The most tragic set of circumstances in electoral politics is when the electorate are beholden to the people they elect because they don't recognize the power
that they have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And my genuine sense is that in many ways, Africa is in that space where the tail is wagging the damn dog.
Yeah. In Africa, different levels and different maturity levels. Yes,
but you see that democracy is fundamentally flawed because it is a dog that is being wagged by its own tail.
2 months ago, I met this chap. He's from West Africa. Let me not mention the country. And, we had coffee. And he loves the Botswana model, and he's been here a couple of times. He's a Canadian citizen. And you're saying, well, in West Africa, democracy doesn't work. He says, and this is someone very learned in the technology space, very practical scientist. And I was listening, and I was like, I was almost quick to say, no, man. But I was like, context. He's from there. He knows the stuff. He knows, like you said, where the level of literacy and understanding and the people, the elite can really leverage that too. And it's very typical, especially in the extractives type space.
But I mean, we started off with Anglo, and so we moved to the contemporary.
Yeah.
I think we would do ourselves injustice if we didn't reflect on a lot of what worked in Botswana.
In Botswana, yes. That's
because,
what it's going to be.
Because a lot has worked. I guess the best thing that happened really was when the chiefs agreed with Sheila Khama's request that they relinquish mineral rights.
To the
invest
state.
them
to
in
the
the
state.
state.
Yeah.
The current generation will tell you that these are their diamonds as if it's natural. Well, let's be clear, it isn't. Men and women have to sit around the table and say, I, Chief Batwing from Kanye, and I, Khosile Tebe from Maung.
Maung, yeah.
I, Khosile Khafela from Muchudi, will relinquish my rights to all underground resources, such that in future we will pool them and create a state of nationhood.
Yeah.
This was profound. It was profound not only because there was that element of statesmanship about the gesture, but also because, of course, it meant economically and politically we avoided the risk of being fractured.
Yes, very fragmented and everybody going for,
Exactly, because imagine, Orapa would be belonging to the people
in
and Janing, would belong. And imagine the bickering. We could hardly maintain the nationhood. So that was very inspired. I think the laws that followed that constitution, in which the state then exercised the right to equity, that's why we have 50% in Botswana. Again, it's not self-evident. I think also what worked very well, and this is a strange irony.
Maybe before you go there, because I'm very much into the whys and the context, because even in my book that I'm writing, I talk about, you mentioned statementhood. And I'm trying to differentiate the type of leadership at independence, the first 10 years, to have, and even to articulate it. And actually the chiefs, I mean, I don't know how easy it was for Batwing and the rest to say, yeah, man, you're talking. But from a leadership perspective, I just, that type of statesmanship that you're talking about, do we know what motivated, what it looked like? Because because I think the foundations of Botswana were really on those men and women whom sometimes we don't say much about them.
Yeah. So there's a lot because it precedes that. One of the champions of mineral rights, for instance, was the late Sheila Khama, who refused to license any mining company until the British said the power rests with the chiefs. Even the power resting with the chiefs wasn't always like that. So we owe a lot to those who came before. But modern day Botswana. So I asked Ramasire the same question. I said, why do you think because you were the vice president. Why do you think the chiefs so readily went along?
Exactly.
And as you know,
his own
he said to me, my dear, the only chief who had minerals in the room was Sheila Khama. By then, we had found BCL and Anglo knew there was
something cooking.
Yes, and so they all looked around and thought, well, maybe I get to share. They had nothing to lose and everything to gain. And in that instant, it made sense until I drove home. And I did the arithmetic and I said, okay, so 1967, Sheila Khama puts this on the table. By then, he has relinquished his position as a chief. He's a head of state. Would you rather be a president of a rich country than a chief of a rich tribe? That's right. I think he was more forward-looking.
Yes.
He was not interested in being a chief. And he was thinking then as a leader of a coherent set of natural resources. And so I think true, in the end, we gained as a nation. But I do not exclude the prospects of his own personal ambition. And the entrepreneur's foresight to see I'm better off a president of a rich country than a chief of a rich tribe. But nobody told me that. That's just me surmising.
That's profound.
But the answer came from the late Saiki to me. That everybody has had everything to gain. So it was the only one who
to
would
lose
be
from
sharing.
A local.
I also think if you think the discovery of a rapper, my son discovers the way you and I discovered the penny and I picked it up. It's a whole process. There was no way by 67 Debeers didn't already have a sense.
Yes, that is something,
So there is a new...
Because exploration started in the 50s, isn't it? Yes, my recollection.
Exactly. So the exploration started in the 30s, but and then they would occasionally stop. And then in 1955, they came in earnest. And then about 12 years later, boom, they had made the discovery of the largest pipe after Williamson in Tanzania. Now, I want to spend a little moment in this discovery thing. One of the things that embarrasses me, to be quite honest, as in Motswana, we don't credit Debeers enough. So Debeers, we have 6 mines. Debeers, out of these 6 mines discovered, essentially 5. Why can't we just say, we are grateful they came here?
Yes.
I don't get it about to me, I think it doesn't detract from us to acknowledge that here is a company that came when the Brits said, you are too poor for me to put boots in the ground. And if you want me to protect you, you are going to pay me. That's how impoverished the world perceived us. Now, they didn't come to save us. They came to save themselves as entrepreneurs.
Got something
but nevertheless, in the process of investing and making these discoveries, look where we are. And if anybody belittles that, consider this. There has not been a discovery for the last 30 years. And that's not because people aren't searching. It's not child's play. And it's okay just to say thank you, you're welcome. Now, how about we move forward from here as friends and, make sure that my children get value.
Negotiate our future together and see how,
to me,
but thank you for this and that and that.
And it struck me when we were celebrating, this was tragic for me because I worked for Debeers and I was the only Motswana with other executives, and we were celebrating 30 years of Jwaneng. There was not a single mention of who discovered it. Really?
Even by Debeers themselves?
No, you have the, what would we mention?
Official, yes.
No,
women
we
official.
don't self-praise. If you understand what I mean.
No, I got you.
But it is I'm talking about in the official speeches.
Yes, official, yes. Official acknowledgement,
written for our principles.
Yeah.
And
this is, it's a very interesting point because, I'm slowly becoming a bit of a social scientist as well. These type of nuances of behaviors and societal movements in terms of, it goes back to the same thing to say, and I think, like you said, not the thank you, but also the increasingly bashing, which sometimes I also say, oof.
Even bashing ourselves, forgetting that we own 15% of that company. How do I ban half your house?
Yeah.
How do I come here and say we live together and this is our house, but then threaten to ban it? How is that possible?
How does it add up?
And so because we have not, this is something we have not done well. And I'm not sure why. We have not sufficiently embraced the company we own. Yeah, we continue to see this as an outsider.
Yes,
and yet, to me, it's tragic. And here's why. It is not just that there is real investment that is being diluted in terms of the brand value. It is that actually, when this company came from South Africa, it has an awful legacy. It is the good company it is because we laundered it.
Yeah.
This is a fact. We gave them a home that made them look better. Now's the time to own them and shine. Why would we not shine? We have created Debeers to become the better company in terms of reputation that it is. We should celebrate it because it is our company. Yeah. But we treat them as if they are the company that they were 50 years ago before they got here.
Some
That's somebody's baby to fry. Yeah. So I think this is tragic. I think it sits in the space of, I don't know, political expediency. Maybe there might even be perhaps a fundamental lack of understanding of the impact. But if you think of what you and I recognize as bashing, think about now where we are with the prospects of finding a partner. How will that play into that space?
Exactly. You got to have a view of the long-term possibilities.
How if you are contemplating taking the space of Anglo, when you look at these headlines, how are they going to land with you if you are a potential investor? How is that helpful for our children?
Let me take you back to the because I think that will visit the whole PPP arrangement, and we've discussed this before, the composition of SOE, public service technocrats into a board. And because for me, some of this stuff we're discussing is actually an outcome of the dynamics within those spaces. You are going to talk about post the negotiations, the Khama, and now the laws that came after. Can we touch it from there now?
Yeah, so I guess, the one of the things we did was the law itself, which was, as laws go, very simple, very clear and uncomplicated. It was passed in 1967. It was amended in 1997. It's looking to be amended. What that tells you is that there's legal stability, there's regulatory stability. And Debeers and Anglo benefited from that and any other, because for years they didn't have to worry about, what is the law today, what is the law tomorrow.
Yes, predictability, which is essential for a business.
Right. And importantly, Botswana laws do not have powers of discretion. So it cannot be up to the minister. This is important. The other institutional thing that's very important is that in the latter years, when there were people, Botswana created what was called the Mineral Policy Committee. The Mineral Policy Committee comprises PS Finance, PS Minerals, the Reserve Bank, the Attorney General, and the PSP. And of course, they are supported by a whole suite of very capable technocrats. They then negotiate. And as somebody who worked for both Anglo and Debeers and saw them, because I worked for Anglo for 8 years, and most people know me as the person who worked for Debeers, but that was actually a shorter period.
Yeah.
But in the various negotiations, whether it was BCL, Botesh, Tati Nickel, BCL, or
Anglo was there before,
what I observed that separated Botswana from other countries I've subsequently seen is that the minister and the president were entirely hands off.
Really? In those days?
Yes, they were given the mandate.
To the technocrats and the experts
yes,
too.
Yes, and that's how it was. And there was no interference. It was clear what was a non-negotiable. It was clear that if you don't bring that, you go home. That was admirable to watch. As a matter of fact, occasionally we as Debeers would be the ones who were grumpy. And then together we would go to their masters and say, we think your people are unreasonable. The people would be there and they would say, well, let's hear you.
Let's hear you out.
And he might say, well, they're not reasonable. This is what the people say they should fight. Go and sort it out. Can't help you. Or he might say, well, I think you may have a point. You go and think about how you resolve. Because what we want is an outcome that works for everybody, but he says, more importantly, works for the country. And people will be able to look and say, I, as an investor, want to go there. He says, if there is an outcome in which people don't want to come here, I don't care how sweet it is. It's an own goal. So there was this, father figure-like approach to the negotiations. Such that you felt, I remember when we negotiated the joint lease, being in the room and thinking, I can't go wrong here. These guys are going to win and these other ones are going to win. I can't go wrong.
There's no,
And so I think the institutionalizing of those processes was good. But in the commercial space, and this brings me to your PPPs, Botswana understood right from the beginning that we were a poor country. We had a GDP of 10,000 rands. 10,000 was the entire coffers.
Thanks.
By the 90s, it ran into billions of US dollars. But we were not always there. So Botswana realized that the development of Orapa could be a flywheel for certain social services that the country did not have the money to fund. And so one of the conditions was to fund the road from Francistown.
Francistown to Orapa, that road,
The other was that they'd build an airport. Now, the airport they would have built because that's how we move diamonds. But the genius was that while the mine would pay for the airport, the state would operate it such that it would be like any other airport in the country.
Correct.
Allowing
to be intertwined into the whole infrastructure for the country.
The same for hospitals, where in a country in which all the hospitals at the time were run by missionaries, the government said, you will build a hospital. But that hospital will serve as a referral for all clinics within a 200 radius, such that all of a sudden the government had a big hospital. Now, you must remember, to attract best-in-class professionally, this hospital had to be better or as good as Santins.
Exactly.
So this was no ordinary
because all these engineers, all these geologists are lending.
Right. As a matter of fact, I think at some point there was a kind of Oscars of hospitals. Engineering Hospital used to win.
Absolutely.
When thrown together with hospitals in the city of Johannesburg.
It was a top hospital,
So that was quite good. And the government said, in exchange, we will subsidize the drugs, but you will run the hospital, staff it, and pay the salaries. But if a child, a woman, a man comes a village sick, you will treat them. And you will treat them and hospitalize them for up to 21 days without charge.
It was that specific.
Yeah. And so it was. that you suddenly had this groundswell of health, road, airport infrastructure. In time, the government went further. As you know, as I suspect you have a borehole somewhere, you have to report the yield on the borehole.
On the borehole, absolutely.
Right,
It's centralized, yes. Once you get the license,
the government is monitoring.
Right.
So as you know, all the mines use borehole water.
Yeah.
The government then said to Debswana, you consume more than all the farmers. Now you're going to monitor everybody. So there is absolute certainty of the performance of the underground water aquifers in the 200-kilometer radius of our mines, because that is an agreement that the company provides to the state for free in a country that is short of water.
Wonderful.
This information is incredible. I can go on and on with the scholarships. You are a product
of it.
At some point, I did a back of the envelope review, and every CEO of every mining company in our country in 2010 was a former employee of Debswana.
Really?
And so I had to do it because we were arguing on the Debswana board whether to stop the scholarship because we didn't need. And my own and others' counter argument was, we trade not for Debswana but for the country. And even if we have in Debswana a foreign MD, but know that in the market we have released thousands of other people. That matters
that's a contribution.
more.
That's a contribution.
Our contribution is not the person who occupies the job. Our contribution is a groundswell of skills in mining. This is where we lose it, where we insist on a citizen and not capability. My genuine sense is this, that while it may flatter to have a citizen, what matters more is whether or not we have the right person.
Absolutely.
To be able to run
for
the
that
company.
asset,
And so this is one of the things that I think Botswana did very well, is the public-private partnership space.
With Debeers.
And you know how it worked with also with HIV/AIDS and later COVID. It was a model that could be used. So I think in that particular sense, we did look. Revenues are given. Who gets 81 cents to the dollar? When I tell people that in our country, Debeers gets 19 cents, we get 18, they say, get out of here. We knew you were a liar from the morning.
They don't believe you.
Yes, and I try to explain. It's just that this is a very profitable. So Debeers is happy because
your joining
the
is
cake is big. And so I think it's hard to see how in the partnership arrangement we didn't do well. Did we do well beyond that? That's another matter.
Yeah.